Well, I had nothing to hide. I had everything to lose. And somehow, I think a lot of us have probably had a very interesting 2026. I know I have. And last week, I had a very rude awakening. And if it wasn't for my mentor and my partner, I don't think I would have probably bounced back as quick. Through the conversations I've had with them, I came to a realization that I've probably been losing a lot of myself in order to get to know myself, get to a better version of myself. But it's a very slippery slope, right? It is a very slippery slope, very thin line. Go around life, you make friends, you go to work, you go about business, right, hoping that you're always putting your best foot forward, not realizing along the way that the essence of who you are is dwindles, right? The essence of who you are is getting lost a little bit, and I felt like that, right? And it was heavily associated with work. And he said to me after I sort of, so I went on we went on a call. I said, "Hey, Dada, like I'm experiencing this and this and this, and I'm not happy, and I feel suffocated. I feel small. I feel cornered." And he said something to me that just humbled my heart so much. He said, "Don't forget that there's a spirit of rebellion in you. And that person, that spirit has led you to where you are today. Don't forget that. Don't suppress that." And it's as if, I promise you, as if the lights were on. Okay. The lights were on, baby. The mic check was on. I remembered who I was. I remembered who I was very quickly. And I said to my partner, I looked at him and I said, "I can't believe I lost that part of me. I can't believe I forgot about her." And now, this does not mean that you shouldn't evolve into something different. Not at all. I just, when I said that, I recognized that I'm not evolving, I'm digressing. The person who I was before and the person who I am today, there's a big difference that I'm not actually happy with, right? And he reminded me, my partner, my mentor, that remember you left me because I worked for him. I was like, okay, where are we going with this? He said, remember you left me. You left me to go work for someone else, and you even left that someone else. I worked as a social media manager before doing content creation full time. And I had left because, to put it very simply, I just didn't like what I was doing. I had left him because I didn't like what I was doing. And he said to me, "Do you like what you're doing today?" I said, "I don't like what I'm doing." He's like, "Then leave." Then that person that had the guts and the audacity to leave when she left me and left the other person, take up the same mantle, take on the same position and posture and leave. Don't forget that person. Don't forget the rebellion in you that led you to who you are. And Tandi, rain check, you've always been this person. Like, since I was a teenager, since I was teenager, young adult, still quite young, still am young, sorry, correction, still am young. I think all significant phases of my life, I've remembered being this person, daring, outspoken, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like that person was being suppressed. That person was being cornered. And it just led me to wanting to have this conversation with you, where in my heart, I'm like, I'm sure there's someone out there that's feeling like you're having to cower, you're having to act small and sort of fall in line and do what is expected of you, when you know deep down in your heart, like, this is contradicting all that I am. I guess in order to sort of like get by. Now, of course, life is about politics, right? There'll be parts of you, there'll be parts of life, there'll be parts of your relationships that you're having to manage. And not everything needs you to go about it protesting, right? But I think with me, I felt that the repetition of having to fall in line was chipping away at who I am as an individual. Reflecting on how this person even came about, I need to respect a lot more, right? I'm thinking about when I was 19, 18 years old and I first worked as a waiter in order to escape the realities of home, that was an act of defiance. That was an act of rebellion, because at that point my parents didn't want me to work, if I'm being honest. They were quite shocked that I had taken on that occupation. Working was not easy. There was a point where I wasn't happy with my salary as a waiter. And I remember one weekend, I decided not to pitch. I called my best friend and I said, "Hey, my babes, I'm gonna come to your house now. I'm kind of tired, mind you. I didn't ask for an off day, nothing like that. She stayed about maybe 20 to 30 Ks away from where I worked, where I stayed. And so at the point that I was using public transport, you're not up and going at any point. So I decided to leave, I think, on the Monday morning, and I headed to work that day. I remember though, my best friend's mom had said to me, like, and then work? I was just like, no, don't worry, mama. Like, all's good. It wasn't all good. I know the reason I was there. I was angry. I was upset. I was exhausted. I think anyone who's worked in the hospitality industry knows that it's a lot. It's a lot of hours. It's a lot of emotional energy. There is a lot that you sort of have to contend with in that space, and if you're not ready, if you're not focused, it can eat you from within. But that was my portion, of course, and that was my journey. At that point though, I didn't believe that what I was going through was my portion, neither were I felt like it was my journey. And so in defiance, I was just like, yeah, no, I'm just gonna, you know got to work on the Monday. I remember walking in and everyone, I was just like, hi guys, hi, hi. And it's just like, come here, fuck's sake, come here. And I was just like, oh my gosh, I'm in trouble. I'm in so much trouble. Again, it's like, didn't you know? Yes, I mean, I knew it was gonna, ruffle up some feathers, but at that point, I was prioritizing my peace. Got into the office. They were like, what do we do with her? Do we fire her? What do we do? Like, she just missed 2 days of work. And at that point, I'm just like, oh God, like I really messed up here. But at the same time, that feeling when you know you did something that might be constitutionally wrong, in your heart, you felt so liberated. I felt liberated in that moment. I felt that, if anything, I might have gone about it the wrong way, but I felt like I was being truthful to who I am. They said, you know what, she sells, so she'll be let off the hook. Start your shift, right? I think there was some kind of misdemeanor, of course, but anyways, a month or two passed and I wasn't happy with my pay. I reached out to Andile, Tata to me now, and I said to him, "Hey, Andile, I'm not really happy with the way things are." So Andile is the owner of the restaurant, right? And I said to him, like, I'm not happy. This is what's going on. He always gave us the room as young adults to talk to him about any issues we may have in the work environment, because his policy was very clear, like, get in, get out, right? But when you're here, we want to cultivate the young ones. I think that was something that was really commendable from him. Through my experience now as an adult, I know not a lot of people, especially in that industry, are well equipped to think of people in that way, or of young people that way. Anyways, I spoke to him and I remember he said to me, okay, fine, meet me at Gold Reef on such a day, such a time. I said, okay, cool, no worries. Got into the environment. I was so immersed. I was so immersed, having walked into the casino, into the restaurant. Things were different for me. You know, the feeling now, upon reflection, was sort of ushering me into a new phase in my life. It was different. It felt like some kind of elevation. Anyways, it's just a change of environment. But at that time, you were young and you were easily impressionable. It didn't matter though. I think the principle didn't matter. It was how I felt in that moment, even if it meant the environment was influencing my feelings. We sat down, he spoke. I told him how I felt. I told him about my grievances. He said to me, okay, cool, we'll look into it. I don't like what you're saying. I'm worried. And he took it quite seriously. He said, I'll talk to my management, but if you feel like this, I think it's something to take on. And I don't want you to feel like your opinion is not valid, or that your experience is not being accounted for. At that point, I also felt like the eyes were on me, because it was like, okay, what is this young girl speaking to an owner about? Like, and I also did feel a bit scared to do it. I did feel scared, but I knew it was the right thing to do because I had nothing to hide. Well, I had nothing to hide. I had everything to lose. And somehow that had built the person that I recognize today. And I believe that fundamentally, because I had nothing to hide, because I was shameless, and because at the same time I was willing to risk it all, I sort of created this avatar, if you may say, that was rebellious, that rebelled against things, that questioned things. And again, these are not things that I believe were not evident growing up. I think that these things were made even more apparent when I went through the restaurant trials and tribulations. Now, having, stepped into this new phase in my life, having quit from working for someone else, it was also quite a lonely environment, I may add, when I was a social media manager. But I quit literally after 3 months, and I was just like, I can't take. It was actually after two. It was like, "Oh," it was after two. I started in January and ended in Feb. I was like, nah, baby, I can't do this. And to someone else, it's like, my babes, what are you doing? You don't have rent. You don't have this. Where are you going? And at that point, I did get a collaboration with a very big brand that I was like, okay, cool. I think if I can do this part time, I could really make a living, really living out of this. Everyone in my life was panicked. My friends were panicked. My family was just like, you're out of your mind, which was quite ironic because they said that to me when I first got my job, right? That, like, why are you doing this? You should be going to school. Da, da, da. I did go to school, got 2 degrees after. I was not without like tears, at what cost. I still got it. When I had left working for Tata, when I had left working at Spur to jump ship, they were worried that you can't go and work for a startup company that you know nothing about. And when I had made this decision, they were worried again that you can't start another career, having only started it a few months ago. But that's the thing about me. I don't like to take the journey commonly taken, right? I don't like to take the route commonly taken. And I think in that, I've recognized that it is a rebellious spirit according to society's norms. With time, I think I've low key, high key suppressed that version of me because things were comfortable, right? I think the urge and the drive to fight for something dwindles, or it becomes a little distant from you when things do feel comfortable, when life does feel a little bit more achievable for you. Up until recently, where there was just a dispute at work, and, a part of me, I felt like, "Ugh, man, let me just do this. Let me just follow in line," which was quite ironic because I felt like what caused me trouble was being myself. And I'm not even talking about the one that's rebelling, right? I'm talking about the one that just asks questions, the one that is inquisitive. That person got me into trouble. That person currently is sitting in a situation where she doesn't know what's going to happen tomorrow. And my mentor said to me, it's okay. Yes, you have things to lose, but it's okay because who you are got you to where you are now. That person was rejected. Guess what? It's kind of like going to reserve tank, or like, get back into your bag, get back into the person that firstly advocates for themselves, secondly doesn't take no for an answer, and maybe thirdly, yes, rebels against the system. And now I'm sort of, it's crazy. I don't think I feel necessarily empowered by these situations all the time, but I do recognize that sometimes slow and steady will win the race, and sometimes you don't have to be very excited to take on such decisions, but it's for the best. It's for the best. It's for you. And I think a part of me now, I'm recognizing that I think when you neglect core parts of your identity in order to please other people, I think you do lose yourself. I think I was losing myself. And I think I am slowly growing into somebody that I can appreciate, that I can love, that I can fend for, because I recognize that this person who I was has led me to who I am now. And I'm so, 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 so grateful for this. Brings me to perhaps wanting to outline what the rebellious spirit is to me, and how I constantly want to train this person, acknowledge her, and use her when she's necessary. This person to me is someone that firstly reclaims her boundaries and her presence, someone who is open to change and flexibility, but is not going to do that at the detriment of her personal will or self respect or even intuition, right? I think that person to me is how I define the rebellious spirit. And I know that this is not something that a lot of women are easy to accept. I think it is a very again, it's just like this constant slippery slope of micromanaging and managing people's expectations and things like that. And I don't mean for it in this conversation to be about the politics of gender, right? Because men do experience these kinds of discomfort. But in this moment, I feel like just from girl to girl, it's just like I speak to my friends and I'm just like, why don't you why don't you speak up? Why don't you say this? And a lot of them are like, no, I don't want to. I'll speak to my young sisters. And it's just like, no, I don't want to. And you know what? Today, I just want to say to you that there's so much more to gain from reclaiming your presence, from reclaiming boundaries, from reclaiming identity of self. And I feel like the minute somebody threatens that, the minute somebody tries to make you feel like your autonomy is not something to be taken into account, your you-ness, your identity as a person, I think that is a situation that you're meant to break free from immediately. I guess those are just the kinds of messages that I just keep telling myself, the kind of feedback. This is my feedback mechanism that I'm just like, you know what, if this is not working out in this way and it's not feeding me in this way, it's making me feel small, these are things that I need to reassess for myself. And so I would say for my young friends and my sisters and all that, and anyone who's listening maybe, is that if you're ever in a situation that makes you feel like you're having to count your steps, having to count your words. Oh my word, I hate that one. Count your steps, count your words, question who you are. Perhaps it's time to rebel. Perhaps it's time to rebel against the structures and opinions that people may have of you, because it is in rebelling that you find yourself. And it might be difficult to contend with the reality that you might not always be right, that maybe you are taking the wrong action. But I remember my mentor saying to me that sometimes in life you have to be audaciously wrong if that's what it takes. You have to be wrong all the way in, because you would have still been yourself. And it is in true honesty, it is in true self you that you are rebirthed, right? That even with time that passes, you can just be like, yeah, I know that was, we all have those moments where you're like, yeah, I know, I did that. But there's nothing that you lost from that. It's sort of like opening a new portal. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to make peace with the decision that decisions make portals, right? Don't be afraid with that reality. Don't be afraid that in saying no, you're opening yourself to an entire new reality that perhaps you may not be equipped for at that point, right? But you have upgraded from the previous one, and there is so much more to gain from this one. So yeah, like the rebellion in you saves you, I think. And yeah, that's just what I wanted to share today. I hope it helps.